Call this meeting to order. Mayor Lee, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you. Ann, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Gerber. Mrs. Boring. Mr. Nancy Zerker.
Here.
Mr. Keenan.
Here.
Mr. Reiner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Saleh.
Here.
Mayor Lucklider.
Here. Thank you. We're beginning our meeting with citizen comments with respect to matters not otherwise on the agenda. Signed up first this evening is Mr. Maurer. If you'd like to come forward.
I would like to, Your Honor, members of council and members of city management, I would like to begin this evening by expressing the highest gratitude and the highest thanks and the highest pleasure that I've experienced in a long time. And it goes to a sector of city management. And I'm referring to the footwomen and the footmen who have planted and who tend the flowers throughout the city. They're simply gorgeous and breathtaking. And I may add maybe even something of a hazard in driving because I take my eyes off the road when I get around there. So it's a marvelous piece of work. Now, I don't want to leave council without some gratitude. To the extent that you are responsible for this, I am very, very grateful for that degunning gateway you have out here in the corridor. I feel it's just the only place in the city I feel a sense of relief. For me, half an hour. For you, 2 hours. Half an hour for me because I'm still on the piano. But we're now the country as a whole is in a state of war. Everybody's carrying guns, and the organization shall remain nameless, which has given the country the mantra that the only solution to guns are more guns. Okay, my mood changes. So I'm grateful for those of you who have set that up out there. I come here for relief. Now, I have with me a newspaper, a Dublin newspaper of July the 18th. And the headline in that newspaper reads, Nestle's Quality Assurance Center Lab expanding. Now, I don't have time to go through this article line by line, so I'll simply ask you, you know what I'm talking about? You know about the Nestle Quality Assurance Center Lab here in the city. Okay. It is, I gathered that the article was a bit confusing in places, and Mr. Ayers, who was quoted, was a bit confusing in places, but I gather its function is to scrutinize very carefully, to test products by Nestle, food products throughout that come to it. It examines them for running from unhealthy to poisonous, and that's what it's assigned to do. Now, am I right about this? It is my sense that that lab is staffed, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm right, that it is staffed by the Nestle Corporation itself. Is that right? Do you see a problem there? If you don't, I'll tell you what it is. You know the old expression, put the fox in charge of the hen house? Now, how many people who be employed by Nestle in this position to monitor the food, what will they say? What will one person say if he or she finds something? Does he or she have the power to go to the press or to go on television and say this is dangerous? Or must this person go through channels and hand the problem over to somebody within the corporation? There's a huge problem here. And what is necessary, of course, is an independent, nonprofit organization to handle this food. For example, the Institute of Medicine or the FDA. Well, there goes the light. Am I done? I have more.
Very nearly.
Am I through?
Just about.
All right. For example, are they going to check the bottled water? There's a second thing, part in the newspaper I'd like to add. Do I have a moment in which there's some people who have announced running for office here in Dublin? I noticed one of them, his name is Schaefer, and he uses two words, at least he's attributed to using two words, which, were I to show up at one of his rallies, I would ask him the meaning of. Two words. I'd ask him, what do you mean by these two words? And the two words are social welfare. I notice also that Greg Peterson is running. He has run before. I would use a word, I think I know probably who's urging him to run, and that's fine, and I would use a word to describe him at the moment, and the word would be, and I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you why I'm using it. The word is harmless, but I think if he heard that word, he would become indignant, and he'd be set going, and he'd be up here, and be ticked off, ready to work. So that's my remark on that. And with that, I
Thank you, Mr. Mauer.
leave the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to add that I agree with Mr. Mauer on one thing, and that the flowers are absolutely gorgeous, and I appreciate staff's effort, and I get comments on it all the time. So thank you for that.
I got a phone call. It was a message, just a 20-second message on my recording, and said, I can't believe I live in a community with roses blooming in the median. How beautiful is that? And they hung up. I have no idea who it was. I think they assumed that I wouldn't recognize the voice or whatever.
We'll pass along the words and let staff know their job, and how well they do it is noticed and appreciated.
Next up, Chris Amorose Grooms.
Good evening, members of City Council, Vice Mayor, Mayor. My name is Chris Amorose Grooms. I'm the Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you all know, and wanted to come before you this evening. We had some time to discuss some of the charges led before us in our last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And with our recent experience with the Bridge Street Corridor Code, we were interested in, although I'm sure we have not nearly learned all of the lessons that we'll learn from using the code, we felt like there were some lessons that we had learned, possibly, that might lead us to taking a second look at the code and maybe evaluating some of its content. The code itself that was effective April 25th, 2012, Section 153.066, Paragraph L, Section 4, and the Code Administration states that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Architectural Review Board may evaluate and monitor the application of the requirements and standards of 153.057 through 153.066 by the ART. The Commission and the Architectural Review Board may advise the ART as to whether it finds that the requirements or standards, including requests for administrative departures, are being applied correctly, and recommended to City Council any changes needed in the BSC district standards and requirements to better implement the vision report. And like I said, I'm sure we have not learned all of the lessons we will, but we would like to take a look at a few of the things in the code that we might be able to assist and possibly make it easier to navigate the code and build out this district that we're all very excited about, particularly us in the Planning and Zoning Commission. We've spent many years working on this, and we would like to take a look at perhaps some of the weaknesses and strengths, and minimize some of the weaknesses and enhance some of the strengths. That being said, we just wanted to come before you. Several of my fellow commissioners are here with me this evening. We just wanted to come before you and let you know that that's what we were planning on looking at, and ask your blessing on that. And following our meeting and the vote to make this motion, we received a memo from city staff that they too were going to be looking at the code and doing some evaluations on it. And we're really excited about that also. We'd like to take a look at it through a bit of an independent lens, and we hope to coordinate with them once they've had opportunity to make their review also, and compare our list of things that we would like to see improvement on, And hopefully, the cream will rise to the top, and all of the issues will become apparent, and we will bring that back to you for your vote and approval at whatever point in time that that will take. The city staff has put together a pretty aggressive schedule. We haven't put together a schedule yet because we haven't started to talk about it. We don't know what the issues are going to be. Once we have opportunity to define what the issues are, we'll put together a schedule. It will likely involve some special meetings. And we'll forward that to you in the form of a memo as that becomes available. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We know that it's pressing, and this is a really important part of our city. So we will do our darndest to work efficiently, if that would be your pleasure. Thank you.
Any comment?
Well, I guess I'll make a comment because I've been involved in a little bit of this in the last few days. And we did write in the actual zoning regulations what Ms. Grooms read to us, so that there was an expectation that at some point in time, the commission and ARB would look at it and make any recommendations to staff and to us. We had discussed ourselves that we felt that we needed to have, you recall that when we passed it, we did a request that a report come to us after implementation of it, maybe 6 months, 8 months, to be able to inform us of what the staff were finding in the utilization of it and making any recommendations. And I think this memo that's in our packet dated August 8th that Ms. Grooms made reference to gives the outline of the staff going to be doing that review. One thing that I thought was really important, and I'm not clear based on the code amendment categories that are listed in our memo, is part of it is how it's written to me. But more importantly, perhaps, is how it's interpreted by the staff and what, based on that interpretation of it, what the decisions are that are being made. That's a piece that's really important to understand beyond the written word, because the written word is sort of just there, if you know what I mean. And it's always, regardless of what our codes have always been, it's largely based on staff's interpretation of how one implements those codes. So I don't know where that stands in here, or if it does. As we've had discussion also about, maybe this is in here, I'm not sure, the refinement of application, that when we had the Stavroff project for sidewalks, that, was raised by several council members, that it was too hard to make the decision in a vacuum because we weren't seeing the total picture of what was being proposed there. And I'm not sure if that's because our code is limiting us to small geographic areas or what, but that's something else that, probably needs to be reviewed in the code as they're reviewing it.
Well, I think as identified in the memo, one of the things that's listed is clarification of intent. And so we agree with that anytime you go through a new process, there's going to be clarifications and corrections. Excuse me. And we've just recently had the first big or major project that has gone through the process with the Edwards project. So that's where we felt that at this point in time was a good time. It's fresh in everybody's minds as to what worked well, what maybe we see as things that could change or be done differently. So that's partly where we think we're at a good point in time to start this initial review, and did look at proposing review in September with P&Z and ARB, and then go from there with the hope or the goal of having in January or February some additional proposed amendments back to City Council for review.
I think this is a good, really a good idea from both staff and P&Z, and I think the more eyes reviewing this, the better, since it is so new. And we're doing one of the most comprehensive examples of this in the country, so I think it's great.
I would agree with, there are a couple things that when I read this, that stood out to me with the update time frame, and I think Ms. Grooms has addressed that, because it felt when I looked at this that there were no opportunities for P and Z. It felt like it was all staff-driven, that, they've noticed the things that need to be reviewed. And so I'm kind of appreciative of P and Z taking that opportunity, because the way I remember, and this may be wrong, but when we passed that wanted it reviewed by P and Z, part of us said, we've been through this and we want P and Z to go through those details, and we don't want it because we're so busy anyway. So I'm glad that we're trying to combine the two things, where P and Z has taken the leadership on this. The other thing, I guess we're talking about this when it's later. I noticed that there was, I'm sure this will be reviewed about the process and how we do this, because the art has reviewed about something, I can't remember, architectural consultant engaged in the art to provide technical review. And I hope that we are able to take advantage of the people we did appoint and why we appointed them, because their expertise in some of this. So I'm real curious, and I'm about if there's any recommendations on processes along with technical changes, that maybe this is something that we can get a better handle on. And in that review, the things that we've done, I'm sure you'll tell us what has gone well, as it says in the memo, and what we could change to enhance it. So I support thank you for coming in and adding to our memo.
You know, you're right, Kathy. We've passed this about 14 months ago, and in that time, I recall that we recognized that this was something new, and that's something that we would have to review periodically. And I thought at the time that review would naturally begin with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and would review not only the code itself, but also how it's progressed, how it's been interpreted, and also the process. We noticed pretty quickly with ARB maybe having some veto rights in effect that we were not necessarily contemplating at the time that we wrote the code, so that's something to look at. And this interpretation, when you write a code, obviously it's, we could build Georgetown or we could build Rockville Pike, and under that same code. So it's all based on interpretation. So I welcome the initiative of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and look forward to the report. And I'd suggest that we get on this sooner than later. Reason being is that I sense there's a lot of projects coming, a lot of developers and others are relying on this code. So, you know, extending it out for 6-8 months, in my opinion, maybe a little too late, so to speak. So the sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and we would agree that, as quickly as we can do it, from the standpoint, and why it's taken us to this point is because we really didn't have a substantial project until we had to go through the whole process with the Edwards project. So, if we can do this in a quicker time frame, then, and there may be some things that can be done quickly that get brought back and get modified, and then maybe there are some other things that take a little bit more time that it would need this time frame or something even longer.
Mike?
Tim, I'd just like to know a little bit more, maybe understand better the ART, the makeup, the committee. Do we change those members from time to time? Who's on it, and then maybe a better understanding for me, and all of you have been on P&Z, I have not, but the 40 applications that were reviewed, I'd like to know more about, how do those fall, what categories, and, the decisions from the very minor decisions to the major, to have a better feel for what they're doing at ART. I don't know if staff can put something together, but I'd like planning and zoning to maybe weigh in on that as well, for me.
Yeah, the majority of the 40 applications that have been reviewed have been sign modifications for the most part. And as far as who's on the ART, it's set by code, and it's listing of director of planning, director of parks, director of, yeah. But we can include that information in an update.
Conversely, should there be somebody else on that? Is that the proper mix of people? And I don't know if it is or it isn't, I'm just saying.
Well, we have
might be something
consultants
we'll
that we
look at.
use for architectural review.
Right.
So that's something that we've been using over the last.
I do try to periodically keep up. How often do we architect so far? Have it often?
Yeah, to asks to address that, to provide you with that as to if they're involved at every meeting, or what level of project do they get involved in,
Okay.
so we can provide that information.
I think the review, I know we've, if you go through and read some of the information sent by, we know at that time. I like your idea that we get a list again, and so it's not just in the minutes, but it's defined for us as the way it's written in the code. I appreciate that.
To piggyback on that, Marcia, I'd be interested in, and maybe this is for our work session as well, I'd be interested in being walked through the process when a big project comes in versus the smaller ones, because I know ART does an awful lot of, what we would
Right.
consider smaller projects, but sort of the process that we go through. One concern that I've had, and I know a number of us have had, and some planning commission members have had as well, is the architectural aspect of the Bridge Street corridor and the form-based code. And I've heard concerns, and I'm not an architect, and I, read things and I look at the pictures and I think, yeah, I like that, but I don't know what language you put in a code to get the architecture that I think we all are interested in terms of the quality. But for me, the big issue is the architecture and the buildings that are going to stand the test of time and be beautiful in 50 years or 100 years. And I guess I'm not completely comfortable that the form-based code gets us that, because I've heard people who are architects who do understand more say, you see these beautiful pictures, but the code isn't what's going to get you there. And if the code doesn't get us there, then what will? And is that, having the architect there, and does the architect have the ability to say, yeah, I know code says this, but this is the building that you're going to build because, these are the standards. So what do we need to get the architecture, I guess, is what I'm really interested in. And again, I'm interested in the process and the ART and who does what and when. And I guess with respect to staff and the Planning Commission and everybody working together, it seems like this is a great time because we have all, been talking about this of late. And, we've said with our own work session, we want to know more. We want Planning Commission to come to that. It seems like it'll be a good time, but, just coordinating all the bodies so that
Right.
we're.
And I think, one of the things that has been discussed from the beginning was the issue of the architecture, and that will drive how this area looks. And I know there's been comments made about who we should use, or potentially who we should use. And the architect that's been mentioned was the architect that was on the Edwards project for the developer. So in that case, we wouldn't have had the ability to use that individual, but we've had conversations with them, and they were involved in some of the early planning for the framework for Bridge Street. So, I mean, we're open to using the right architects for this process, and recognize that that is going to be, if not one of the most important components in getting Bridge Street right.
And Marcia, sometimes, architectural review comes by way of the citizens. And, I know we've gone to a form-based code, but under the PUDs, any resident could come forward, opine, and that whole process was sort of vetted by P&Z on what is aesthetically compatible with the area. Not necessarily suggesting we go back to that, but somehow some assurance in the code where we can get to that same result.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I would remind us of when we wrote that code, in the process of the code, that we had been getting a lot of complaints about the length that it was taking developers to go through the Dublin system, and that some were discouraged over that because length costs money. And so I think that we were responding to that concern by developers by setting up the art and defining the difference between what went to that versus what went to P&Z. I think there's other ways that we could choose to do that would still be including the community board that is the representation of the community, and where citizens tend to go if they want to make comments about development that's coming forward. And that maybe instead of the exclusion of the commission, that we should be looking at timeframes that we can get through a process that would end up being the same result that we were looking for in terms of respectable turnaround times.
Well, and I know, just like with the Edwards project, it did go through planning and zoning, and it depends upon some of the issues with regard to waivers and how those are brought forward. So it doesn't preclude going through P and Z for different levels of review, and there the public does have the option. But we can provide updates on, you know, what goes to P and Z and what doesn't, and provide you with the update on how the ART works and the use of the architect that we would have as a consultant.
Marcia, to piggyback on what Amy said, I think that was one of the concerns brought up, is that if the project comes in and ticks off all the little boxes, it doesn't matter what it looks like, and we can't, well, as I understand, if it ticks off the boxes, you're in. And one of the concerns that was, I believe, brought up was that if a project comes in that looks better than the ticked off boxes, then what they had to do was go through the regular process on that. And I think that was one of the concerns that was brought up at the beginning. So, you know, I'm not sure I heard Mary Lee right, but I'm not sure that this is a fix. We wanted to expedite, you know, the process, but I don't think the way we did it is necessarily the fix. And I think we need to look at perhaps some of that again.
Well, I think we're going to hear back from Marcia and staff. Marcia mentioned, I think it's somewhere in this memo, it mentioned something about roughly 40 matters that have come before the ART. What I believe I understood Marcia to say was that the vast majority of those had to do with sign matters. And so I think that one of the things we want to evaluate is whether that's the sort of thing that should continue to proceed through an administrative review, or whether that's something that requires planning and zoning's attention. So,
Well, and
okay.
I would think that that's where we can really use planning and zoning, because they have had firsthand knowledge of these things, I assume, more than we do. So I think we can rely on their feedback also.
Well, again, as I think everybody agrees, what we're trying to balance here, you know, is our good outcomes and also the interest of the developers and businesses, you know, to get through the process in as speedy a fashion as possible. So anyway, I think enough discussion? All right, very good, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask one point of clarification? I was hearing a general consensus of approval for us to undertake this matter.
Think so.
Yep. Marcia, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe what you're asking, because just what I've heard is that there was the thought that maybe staff would not be involved in the discussion at P and Z, and I think staff needs to be there and participate in the conversation with P and Z.
We would certainly rely heavily on them for information and things, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Dave Noyce.
Good evening. My name is Dave Noyce, and a few months ago, it was brought to my attention that there were some ordinances within Dublin that did not comply with state law, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank council for their cooperation and indulgence in working to rectify those. I've had some discussions with the assistant law director for the city, and it's been real helpful, and we're making progress. We did have some issues rise up last weekend at the Dublin Irish Festival regarding wording on the signed the rules for admission to the event. We've actively had a discussion with the assistant law director on that, and I think that's going to progress well. And again, I just wanted to thank council. I did see some issues on the signage upon entering the building tonight, so you may get yet another email from me in the near future. But otherwise, I just wanted to express my gratitude. Thanks.
Mr. Noyce, before you leave the podium, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I think you neglected to give us your address for the record.
Oh, absolutely. 6532 Birch Park Drive, Galloway, Ohio, 43119.
Great, thank you.
And I visit Dublin and many of the other towns and suburbs around Columbus often. I enjoy the park. You'll probably see me at Muirfield every other year. You know, you've got probably as has been said many times, you've got the prettiest city in the area, and I hope that stays that way.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Smith, you have any comment?
No, we had an internal meeting following discussions. We talked to this gentleman at the Irish Festival. In fact, he asked for me, and I was off-site. My son met with him, talked with him on the phone afterwards, and I think he raised some issues that we're dealing with. I also think that some of the information, we could have probably been clearer with it when it was dispersed, but we'll take care of that in the future. Thank you.
And Marcia and/or Steve, council will be advised.
Yeah, you'll be getting a memo from us and a report and perhaps some legislation changes.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good, thank you. Moving along to our consent agenda. I would move that we approve, well, I'm sorry, let me first ask whether any council members wish to remove any of the 4 items from this evening's consent agenda. Hearing nothing, I would then move that we approve the actions requested for the 4 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mr. Gerber? Yes. Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to the second readings of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 60-13.
Authorizing execution and delivery of a development and tax increment financing agreement and an infrastructure agreement to provide for the first phase of redevelopment of Dublin Village Center, declaring an emergency.
Should we have read these together, 60-13 and 61-13?
We can do them separately.
Okay,
Be-
all right.
Basically, all that we're asking this evening is that we postpone this legislation until the August 26th meeting for both 60 and 61.
Is there a second? Second. And if you call for the vote with respect to both 60-13 and 61-13?
Mrs. Boring? Yes. Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Mr. Keenan? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to 63-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to NVIDIA Biopharmaceuticals, Inc. to induce it to retain an office and associated operations and workforce within the city. Authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Gracia, good evening.
Good evening, Council. Don't have any other additional items to add from the last council meeting, but I do have some guest representatives from the NVIDIA Biopharmaceuticals here today. We have Brent Larson, who's their Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer, and Erica Gibson, who's the Director of Finance and Administration. They're here to answer any questions you may have for them regarding their project, and also provide a little overview if they'd like to address council as well on their expansion project and their continued investment in Dublin. So with that, I'd invite Brent to come up and just answer any questions you may or may not have.
Please, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Larson.
Good evening.
Would you care to tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure. NVIDIA is a biotechnology company. We are focused on precision diagnostic pharmaceuticals. Most of them are radioactive at this point in time. The first one was just approved by the FDA this past March, so we're very pleased to be working with our friends across the street in Cardinal Health to distribute that particular product now across the U.S. market. It's used as a diagnostic agent in breast cancer and melanoma surgeries. We also have another product in development that is used in, is intended to detect the presence of amyloid plaque in Alzheimer's patients, so as an indicator of the presence of an advancement of Alzheimer's. And a third product that's used to detect the presence of Parkinson's disease. So those are both in what we call phase 3 levels of development. So very late stage biotechnology development processes and clinical trials. And we have a fourth product that is called RigScan, which is actually the founding technology of the company. It's been around from Ohio State for about 30 years that we're working to reinvigorate the efforts on that and bring that to the market as well for the detection of colorectal cancer. So we've got a number of different things in late stages. We're a fairly highly motivated and highly energetic group that's trying to bring some new business and bring some new growth to Dublin.
Well, this is very exciting. The 40 full-time jobs that currently exist, could you tell us what type of jobs are? Are those scientists or those?
A mixture. We're a fairly virtual company, so we tend to outsource a lot of the labor-intensive parts of the processes, both the marketing, the sales, and manufacturing parts. So our workforce is fairly white-collar, very highly educated. We have about 40 folks, as you mentioned, here in Dublin, which are in the clinical trial management arenas, so scientists, medical professionals, PhDs, and so forth of that nature. We've got a regulatory affairs group who deals with the FDA on a regular basis that also has a number of highly educated and highly trained folks in those particular areas. And then we've got our finance and administration area that reports to me that's here also.
And the 20 jobs that this agreement envisions adding to your operation?
Primarily, it would be spread out across the board, but I'd say the vast majority of those are going to be in the clinical trial management, so the PhD type of area as well.
That's great. It's very exciting. I know we've read about this, certainly in the newspaper and the media has reported this. It's, sounds like a very exciting development.
Well, it certainly is. So we're very, obviously pleased to be doing it here in Dublin, but very pleased to be and proud of the fact that the advancements we're making and the contributions to medical treatment in these very critical diseases as well.
Well, we're very excited as well that you're staying here in Dublin. Jeremiah, my understanding is that from your memo that this agreement over its term would result in a net increase revenue-wise, income tax revenue-wise of nearly $1 million over
Yes,
its
to the
term.
city, yes.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, that's very exciting. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you'd call for the vote.
Mr. Gerber? Mr. Reiner? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is ordinance 64-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Persistent Systems, Inc. to induce it to create an office and associated operations and workforce within the city, authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Great. Ms.
Good
Gilger,
evening. I also don't have much to add since introduction, but to recap, this is 30 brand-new positions to the city, all in the IT arena. The company is Persistent Systems. This would be a brand-new operation in the state of Ohio. The state also has participated through a job creation tax credit. This is a 4-year performance incentive tied to a 5-year lease. And the city would net approximately $210,000 in new income tax. We do have a representative of the company here this evening, Brat Siney, and I will invite him up to the podium so that he could answer a little bit about the company that's looking to move into Dublin very soon here in the fall.
Very good.
And we can also answer any questions.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much, council members, for inviting Persistent to talk about the company and to talk about what we're going to be doing here in the community. Persistent is a global software product innovation company. We work with companies such as Yahoo, IBM, Microsoft to develop software products. We are working with several companies here in the Columbus area as we start to talk with them to build solutions for them. We have decided to set up operations here as compared to looking at several other facilities that we have in the country. We are also working with Ohio State University to not only employ graduating students from there, but also to work with the Dean of the Academic Affairs Department there to work on their curriculum development. Persistent has 7,000 global employees, most of which are located in India, about 6,200 in them. We have about 350 employees in the US, 200 in California, about 35 in Washington State, and about 25 in North Carolina. We were considering between expanding facilities either in Washington or North Carolina and also considered developing a new center here in Columbus. Because of several reasons, we have decided to grow or to start and grow business here in Columbus because of easy access to markets on the East Coast. Also availability of talent because of OSU and several other companies here in the region. And of course, thanks to the council and to Colleen for helping us get the incentives package for setting up operations here. We're investing about $750,000, and we're going to have 30 employees as we start out. We hope to have about 100 employees by the end of the year. And in working with the university and several companies here in the region, we hope to make a positive impact very quickly. Thank you very much once again for having us here in Dublin, and we're excited to be a part of the community. Thank you.
Well, we're excited to have you here as well. I was wondering if you could tell us what in particular, or if anything in particular, about Dublin attracted your company and you to locate here.
Yes. OSU has a vast majority of the talent pool graduating out each year that we need. Also, we have started to now work with Cardinal Health, in addition to several other companies that we are talking with here in the Columbus area. That was primarily the reason to be here in Columbus. I live a little bit north of Cincinnati. Lived here for about 20 years in the region, and know the CEO personally for many, many years. So he asked me to help set up operations and get it going. So I'm an executive consultant to the CEO as I'm setting up operations here.
Great. Well, that sounds very exciting, and we're happy to have you in Dublin. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote, please.
Sure. Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Ms. Janice Zerker? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
And Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to the introduction and first reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 68-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute the necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 0.078 acre more or less fee simple interest, which is present road occupied, 0.140 acre more or less fee simple interest, which is present road occupied, a 0.015 acre more or less permanent multi-use path easement, 0.023 acre more or less permanent multi-use path easement, 0.009 acre more or less temporary construction easement, and a 0.010 acre more or less temporary construction easement from Michael L. and Susan K. Eager, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Introduction, please. Thank you. Ms. Ott.
Good evening. This ordinance before you this evening is to authorize the acquisition of right-of-way, both present road occupied, as well as permanent and temporary easements from the Eagers. This is necessary for a multi-use path on Brand Road. We're asking for emergency with the timing of the project. In particular, we're hopeful to be able to bring back bids in early September for you and be under construction yet this fall.
Questions, comments?
Is it anticipated the project will be completed this fall?
Yes, we are working through some issues with one bridge that needs to be set and the lead time on ordering that bridge, so we may be everything but the bridge set. So we're working through that detail right now, and we'll know when we get bids back.
Anyone else? Would somebody like to make a motion to treat this as an emergency?
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for a vote on the emergency?
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance?
Mr. Gerber? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to ordinance 69-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to acquire a 0.016 acre more or less fee simple interest that is present road occupied property, 0.041 acre more or less permanent multi-use utility grading utility and drainage easement, and 0.023 acre more or less temporary easement from Michael C. Chrisman, and declaring an emergency.
Introduction, please. Thank you. Ms. Ott.
This is another property on Brand Road in which we have interest to acquire. The city has worked with Mr. Chrisman over the past several months and have come to the terms presented to you here this evening.
Any questions or comment? Hearing none, if somebody would like to make a motion to treat this legislation as an emergency?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And if you call for a vote?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance?
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
And Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 70-13.
Rezoning approximately 10.5 acres located on the west side of Paul Blazer Parkway between the intersections of Rings Road and Park Center Circle from PCD Planned Commerce District to PUD Planned Unit Development District to modify the development text and preliminary development plan regarding sign and parking requirements.
Introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I have a brief presentation outlining the proposal before you tonight. As you stated, this is ordinance 70-13, which is a rezoning for 5515 Park Center Circle. The site is located to the west of Paul Blazer Parkway, south of Rings Road. It contains 116,000 square foot building in the southern portion of the site. It has a jogged property line along the western property line. It has some access and easement agreements that I discussed in the memo regarding some limitations for parking as part of this proposal includes modifications to their parking lot. There's also floodplain located in the northeast corner, as well as off-site stormwater pond located in the northwest corner that serves this site as well as the sites to the west and to the south. The proposal before you includes two pieces, which I've outlined in the memo. The first is proposed modifications to the development text regarding their signs. The existing text permitted 2 monument signs with a total of 26 square feet each for each sign with a 10-foot height restriction. It permitted 4 colors and then increased secondary image. With this proposal, the applicant is proposing to include 2 monument signs, one at the entrance off of Paul Blazer Parkway, and then one along Park Center Circle, which is located to the south. Then in addition, they're proposing to include canopy signs along this western frontage. The text makes allowances for a single or multi-tenant user, depending on how this building would ultimately be leased.
Excuse me, just to clarify. It states that the existing text allows for 2 monument signs. Are we talking about 2 additional monument signs, or is that just being repeated?
Yes, it's just being, this is what, yes, the existing is what is shown in the text. This is just swapping out new size requirements for this. Since it's the rezoning, I don't have those details. They will be required to come before the Planning Commission with their final details of that. And that was a condition of approval that all the signs for this, including the canopy signs and directional signs, which wouldn't normally be seen, those would also have to go to Planning Commission for review.
But they would have the ability to have them by right if we were to approve this.
Right, absolutely.
Sight unseen.
True. The canopy signs are address number only, and they would be limited to this western frontage. The reason that is included as part of the text is that the code permits 18-inch letters. Their applicant is requesting 24 inches, so that's why this is, the canopy sign portion is included within the text.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then the directional signs, they're including 3 internal directional signs, which are limited to 6 square feet and would be located adjacent to the building if it was developed in a multi-tenant fashion. That way you would know which building you were to be entering or which portion of the building to enter. And then they do have 1 external directional sign, which meets our code requirements for size. They just included that to be comprehensive, but that is anticipated at this southwest corner, but would be limited to our directional sign requirements, which is the 4 square feet and 3 feet in height. And this was modified from the Planning Commission. There was an additional monument sign originally proposed as part of P&Z, as well as some additional wall signs for the tenants. The applicant has removed that from the proposal before moving to council. So this includes the modifications. The second portion of this proposal, which is probably the most significant, is making modifications to their proposed development text and the preliminary development plan regarding their parking. The required parking for this is for the site is at a ratio of 4 parking spaces per 1,000. They actually exceed that in terms of what is being provided. They're almost at 5 per 1,000. But given the changes in the market and the demand to lease this building by particular tenants, they're requesting modifications to permit upwards of almost 6 parking spaces per 1,000. And in order to do this, the applicant is making 3 different modifications. One is to reduce the size of the parking space width to 8.5 in order to accommodate and create additional parking spaces. They're also requesting to remove some existing parking lot islands within mostly in the northern portion of the site, as well as then to make modifications within this northern area, which is fairly significant in that this is currently open space on their site and consists of a large number of landmark trees. The applicant provided a detailed survey by an arborist, and we've met with them on site and looked at the trees and looked at this survey and had some significant discussion at Planning Commission. In this study, it was identified that 5 of those 7 trees were in poor condition and should be removed. And Planning and Economic Development, when we were reviewing this, noticed and noted that this change in would be a huge change in policy from the city, and that we have take significant pride, as we've talked about tonight, in the city and the landscaping and the amenities of particular sites. So we did not enter into this review lightly, and noting in the memo as well some significant policy discussion that we had at Planning Commission regarding whether the proposed site modifications would be although they're counter to code, would make the site more economically viable. Whether we should consider that, and then also considering that we could continue with our current practice, but resulting in some less competitive economic development standpoint for this particular building. This was discussed heavily at the Planning Commission, and we had provided as part of their review some alternatives for tree replacement. If we just went with the current code requirement, they would only be required to replace 131 inches. So planning suggested alternatives to this, and what was chosen by the Planning Commission was for them to do a complete tree replacement, which would be over 280 inches once you remove and modify the landscaping on this site. So the applicant would be responsible for replacing all of the trees that are removed. As well as, and this was a big discussion at the Planning Commission, deferring this parking and the modifications to this site once the applicant or the tenant determines that it's necessary. So they would not be permitted to just go and apply for a building permit and make these changes without documentation and information from their particular tenant that this was actually required. So as part of that review, Planning and Zoning Commission made a recommendation of approval to City Council with 8 conditions, which I've included in your memo. And we are then recommending approval at the second reading in August with regard to this. And I can answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Any questions?
I'm
Staff?
curious if they're recommending adding 280 caliper inches of trees back, yet you're removing all the green spaces and a lot of the green islands. Where are those trees going to be located?
That is a good question. We had some significant discussion about that. There is, if you're on the site, some sparse areas along the perimeter of the parking area that we have as a condition of approval to add additional trees, particularly with the removal of some of those interior landscape islands that the applicant will be required to fill in those places along the parking edge, and then again, where they can fit additional trees and any other inches that they couldn't fit on their site, they would be able to pay the fee in lieu of. But I mean, our goal is to get the trees on the site, but to be prudent to good, as you're aware, landscape practices. So I don't have the final details. I wouldn't have that until the final development plan.
I was thinking the same thing as John, because there's one development, Bryson Cove, that required all these trees, and what happens is they don't mature because there's too many. Too close. So you said good landscaping practices. I'm going to assume that means We're not going to force a bunch of them.
Absolutely.
Okay, in the same spot.
I'm sort of curious, how did planning and zoning perceive, we've enforced this legislation for 33 years. How did they perceive stripping out the greenways? And was there any modification they could have done to make those still viable and still reach the quota for the parking spots?
Given the, well, I'll answer the first part. This, we did have, like I said, a really significant discussion at the Planning Commission about removing this because it is an amenity for this site, and we want to preserve as many trees as we can, and that's a really significant goal for the city to continue. So that was a discussion that we had at length about this, and were there alternatives? And as part of the review, initially, when we met with the applicant and economic development met with the applicant, we were trying to find other alternatives to that. And there are some significant access easements that limit where parking can go, particularly along in this northern portion of the parking lot. And then, as you can see, the property line jogs. So part of their development is actually not on their property. So making modifications in here and picking up some additional parking that we originally were anticipating was not possible, given the parking restrictions that are for that site. And then in addition, there's floodplain issues up here in the northern portion of the site as well. So we did look at as many alternatives as we could to try to minimize the reduction of this open space.
Yeah, I think we're all a little conflicted because, in one, we want to assist these people leasing this building and helping them out. And then two, the reason that people are moving to Dublin and not to Arlington or New Albany or these other cities or Worthington is because this is a green, attractive, beautiful city, and we wrote these ordinances where parking lots would have shade trees in them, and you wouldn't see a sea of asphalt by the acre. So, the landscape architect, and I think representing my colleagues on this too, what I'm looking for is what's the viable solution where we can meet a common ground here, where we can still have a building we're proud of when you drive by it and it looks attractive and it's not a sea of asphalt, and yet we can possibly help this applicant meet their parking requirement.
Parking garage.
We had that exact same discussion. And again, having met out on the site and looking at the trees that are out there, we discussed also looking at alternatives for, could we remove portions of this open space where the trees were not in the best condition, still preserving others. But getting that critical number that the applicant is looking for is really difficult. And maybe they can speak a little bit to the economic side of that. But from a site analysis standpoint, this is...
Is this because today in an office space you're using less square footage because you're stuck in a cubicle?
Yes, yeah.
And
that's
the way
my
to lease this
understanding
building is...
The amount of space required to employ a person is less than it was when this building was originally built, thus requiring the parking.
And that is a problem with like a lot of the old office buildings. It really
Yeah, we had
is.
that discussion about this building, and then there's several others in this same area that have the same problem.
I think John, though, brings up an interesting point that I know I wrote in my notes, that this was such a major policy departure that I think it should have been brought to council before it was taken to one of our boards and commissions. They shouldn't be making that kind of decision in my mind. We should have made it.
They were way outside of what they
And,
should have been.
well, they weren't by choice. They
Right.
were because the case was brought to them. And I still would vote against it tonight on the basis that we need, as a council, to have this discussion and make our policy what we want in the city. I'm not discrediting that there's economic development issues, et cetera, but we need to determine what John's talking about, or what are the alternatives. There are other alternatives to this. Second of all, I'm very concerned over why we are bringing an economic development issue to planning and zoning. That is the privy of council, and economic development historically has not been a reason taken to planning and zoning. They were exempted from that being part of their decision-making. So that also is of concern to me. And in here, you state that There were a number of policy concerns that were raised as a result of this application, but you don't state what they are. And just that, apparently, that was the discussion that you all had there. So I understand the problem, and particularly with a number of these larger-sized buildings that we have along 270 and the workforce needs. But I think as a body, we need to have a work session or something, a special meeting, to come up with how we would want to have the policy based on what John's saying too, because this is really a foundation of our community. And we need to look at all the alternatives available before we can approve one sitting, for me anyway, approve one isolated case.
If I could, I'm just, I guess, really disappointed that we're having this policy discussion, because I believe that, as John stated, we're different. We don't allow a sea of asphalt. We have those parking islands for a reason, and it's because, you know, they make the parking lots attractive and green. We have landmark trees that we go out of our way to preserve, and I too merely understand the problem. We have a building that, you know, needs, you know, more parking for it to be completely competitive. But I would argue that in this case, because we're talking about landscape trees, you know, this isn't a site that we can max out. And I know that, you know, perhaps they're in poor condition, but that was an analysis by somebody who'd like to cut them down. We've had a number of significant windstorms, and the trees still stand, and they leaf out in the, you know, in the spring. And, you know, you drive by, and that's a beautiful sight. And part of it is well, all of it is the trees. It makes it very different from any other site, and I would say that that's an amenity. And, you know, would every company be interested in that building? Probably not. Are we going to have to, you know, maybe allow it to sit vacant? We have a lot of other sites where we can max out the parking. This isn't one of them. And in my view, this is such a departure from our policy. I don't have to see the whole issue. I can, you know, say I can't support this. This is, you know, maxing out a site with these landmark trees and landscaping that we've already established. It's not worth it to me. I think that this building is competitive. It's a beautiful site. I would argue that that's an amenity. And, you know, it may have to wait for just the right tenant, but I don't think, you know, that's in effect asking us to set aside everything that makes Dublin special for economic development. And not that economic development isn't, you know, one of the most important things that we do, but I think we have other sites in the community where we can modify the parking. In this case, this is just not something I can support, and I'm also disappointed that, you know, Planning Commission is charged with having that discussion. Yep. They shouldn't be charged with that. That's not, you know, I would expect them to look at the landscaping, look at the zoning code, and uphold that, and then the policy part of it comes to us. And so I agree with my colleagues on that, but I'm sorry, I will not be able to support this.
Amy, I'm totally in agreement with you, and we've done this on other things, that if it's not the right site for a particular business because of those different things. And one of the things is you will see a sea of asphalt, and maybe it's just not the location. But the bigger point for me is, which both of you have mentioned, is that there's a conflict for me when the P&Z is expected to consider economic development in their zoning. That's not what I had expected of them to do. I expected them to keep our city good-looking and appropriate. So that's a very disappointment to me, and I agree with Marilee and Amy on that. But again, maybe this isn't the right site for that, and I will not be able to support it either.
Well, I agree with you ladies, for all the reasons you've stated. But this issue about parking and the like is not new. You know, we've been aware of this for a number of years now. We've asked for some ideas and some thoughts and to discuss this. And so for staff to bring this up to P&Z, I find incredibly disturbing, and I won't get into why that happened. But, we've talked about this, we've asked for more, so we could establish a policy that is consistent with, 2013 and beyond expectations. And it's not here tonight, and I don't know what the pleasure of council is, whether to table this, vote it down, or what, but it certainly isn't ready for my vote this evening.
One of the things that concern me is that today, that's what they want, and then what happens 5 years from now if the building gets sold or changed and they're only using a half again, and then we have all this asphalt, because it can change in a heartbeat.
And those are the things I thought we were going to talk as we establish policy going forward.
And I think, I'm not sure we can establish a complete policy because each site is different. And as I said, I believe that there are sites where it would be appropriate to max out the parking. I just don't think that this is one of them. And, I don't know how maybe you do it on a site-by-site basis. You're correct. We do have a problem with our parking ratios, but I don't think this is the site where you solve that.
Could we, not to discourage the applicant, but could we table this and have them relook the parking scheme and how it's laid out planning-wise?
John, I'd like to ask the applicant's representative to come forward, please. Good evening. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Mayor the Collector. It's Jack Reynolds, Smith and Hale, 37 West Broad Street, Columbus, Ohio, and I'm here this evening because Mr. Hale is on vacation. And hearing your all's comments this evening, I would certainly ask that you all table this so that we can sit down and talk. We had long discussions with the Planning Commission about the need and what was being discussed. So again, please give us an opportunity to come before you all on maybe an informal, a work session, and we can sit down and talk about what is being proposed here this evening. So I would hate to cut it short without having been here. Again, he made a fairly articulate presentation to the Planning Commission, and that's why we're here this evening with some recommendations for approval. So again, instead of just hearing or seeing what was written on paper, please give us an opportunity to come back before you all and discuss the project.
Thank you. Marcia, would you like to comment?
Well, the one thing that we had talked about at one point, that the issue of parking and the number of spaces that are needed are similar to some of the changes in the sign code. And that was one where we brought the information to council, looked at what was being requested by businesses. Council had a review, made a recommendation back to P&Z or provided your input, and then the sign code overall was changed. On this one, there was some discussion about bringing some issues related to parking requirements, and similar to what Amy just mentioned, sometimes it's difficult to look at things like this across a broad category, and so that it was going to be project by project. And so when the application was then filed to move this forward, then it was put on P&Z's agenda for review. And the reason the economic development issue was discussed at planning and zoning, because that was the reason they were wanting this to be reviewed and looked at for economic development purposes. They've had issues with leasing the building and have had tenants that have been turned away because they couldn't meet the requirements. So that's why this got to P&Z in the manner that it did.
I'm wondering that, I don't know if our process allows it, and maybe we ought to adjust it if it doesn't, that something like this, which is really a policy-related question, should have come here first for that component of the conversation, and, a decision made before going to planning and zoning.
PUDs, they could come to us, so.
But here's the thing, even if we still didn't put in economic development and P&Z turned this down, and we felt, and we've always got that process, we can overturn P&Z's decision. So it's still, P&Z would look at it, tell us the reasoning why they turned it down, and if we felt it was important enough, we could, overturn it. So we do have a process right now that allows for that.
But what I heard them saying was that P&Z had to weigh a lot of economic development issues, and I don't I don't want to put that on
don't
them
either.
in part of their review.
Well, it's not part of the
And-
PUD criteria.
And I know, and staff was in, kind of between a rock and a hard place. And I do believe that we probably are going to have to look site by site. And as I said, in my view, it's nothing,
It's not about the project.
it's not about the project at all. We certainly understand the problem. It's just this site, and it's very special. And I can't imagine how horrible I would feel driving by, watching those trees be cut down. It's just not something
Tim,
we can do for
Mike.
money.
I'm just a little confused about the parking, and it looks like there's a change, and we need more spaces per square footage or what have you. But we had a similar conversation about creating basically a sea of asphalt in some of the buildings or retail. Is it different for retail versus, because didn't we talk about the fact that maybe we were a little over exuberant on some of the parking regs?
Yeah,
I mean, we
mean,
did
we
have
have-
that conversation probably 6
Yeah,
months
I
to a
think
year
that
ago.
was true with commercial ones.
and there are different requirements for square footages, so many lots per, I think it's 150 at retail.
Yeah, it
and
definitely,
then-
the ratio is
So there are different levels, and I know there have been some changes in the number of parking spaces that have been required based upon what the known use is and the number of spaces that are needed based on past history and things that we've learned that certain developments will not require that much in way of.
So we just need to be cautious about what we are planning on
Okay.
doing, whether it's more or less or whatever, with
Well,
respect to use.
And I guess in this case, in my view, a compromise that I could live with would be the restriping, maxing out the parking with the existing asphalt that you have. I'm fine with that. And certainly if you, I know that the other businesses in the area use their lots, but if there's, some kind of agreements that could be reached, that's fine too.
Well, I think it would be useful for council to have the discussion, to give staff guidance, because, we've been at this, for some time. Some of us, have history at the Planning and Zoning Commission and so forth, but that's, that's certainly not a requirement to have the discussion here. But the guiding principle with respect to landscaping and screening and how we might accomplish the screening concern, versus the landscaped islands that we're accustomed to and so forth. I mean, I think that's causing us all some angst. Certainly if any trees are going to come down, that's angst. But then, we also want to balance that, against our economic development interest. And so, I think we need to have that conversation, and hopefully sooner as opposed to later. So if it's acceptable to the applicant, we will table this matter. Hopefully, council can have this discussion, as I said, sooner as opposed to later.
Please.
And you can continue to have conversation with staff regarding the status of this matter, and we'll go from there. Is that acceptable?
You want a motion to table?
Please.
That's a motion. I'll second it.
Okay, very good. Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, folks,
And I-
very much.
And I'd suggest you take another look at it. There might be a way possibly to incorporate the parking you need and the green space. I don't know who worked it out or how much effort was put in it, but
We would love to present the permutations that we've been through in terms of trying to preserve the green space. So, again, we hope that you all will take an opportunity to sit down with us and work through that.
okay.
Thank you all.
Great,
But-
thank you.
But, Jack, just to be clear, we understand you went through that exercise. We're not accepting it. So we don't want to hear the same thing from Ben that he gave at P and Z who accepted it. So you need to look at other alternatives to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well stated.
Thank you for clarifying that, dear.
Ordinance 71-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Decillion Healthcare LLC to induce it to locate an office and associated operations and workforce within the city. Authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Gilker.
Good evening. We've been meeting with representatives of a startup pharmaceutical company. Most of the startup is going to occur through merger and acquisition, purchasing companies that have existing drug licenses. and they are looking to locate a facility in the Northwest Columbus area, creating 22 pharmaceutical positions by 2018. They're looking to either purchase a building or lease for 10 years. So before you tonight, an introduction is a 7-year performance incentive tied to a 10-year lease or a purchase of a facility. It is 12% and valued at $21,000. And we estimate that we would net approximately $131,000 over the term. And they have identified several buildings in Dublin, one specifically that does interest them. And we will have company reps at second reading to answer any additional questions you have, and I can answer any this evening.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. We'll have the second reading at the August 26th council meeting. Ordinance 72-13.
Authorizing provision of certain incentives to Prospects LLC to induce it to retain an office and associated operations of workforce within the city. Authorizing execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Introduction, please. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll begin by giving a little bit of background on who Prospects is and how this deal came to be. So Prospects is a business services firm, and what they do is they specialize in sales and management training, as well as sales lead generation services. So to give you a background of how this process came into fruition, the company is currently located at 7001 Post Road, which is one of the buildings purchased by Ohio University for the Heritage College. So at that point, we began a real estate search with the company, looking for possible sites in Dublin while they underwent a regional search for real estate at that point. So basically, Prospects currently has 25 employees and plans to expand to just over 50 positions in the next 3 years. So the relocation came about because of the building purchase and also because Prospects is planning some significant growth over the next 3 years. Excuse me. In the light of that relocation and the need for expansion, before you tonight is a 15% performance incentive on withholdings capped at $15,500. And actually, just one item of note is that performance incentive is on new withholdings only. And also, in addition to that, a $2,500 location grant, both of those incentives contingent on an execution of a 5-year lease. The city estimates that this will net approximately $160,000 in retained and new withholdings over the term of the agreement. So if you have any questions or concerns, I'd be glad to address them.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments?
Are you at liberty to state the location yet?
They have 2 locations currently pinpointed, so the company asked that I didn't disclose that.
Sure.
As respect to their negotiation process.
Thank you.
Michael, I hear you say 160, but that's not what I'm reading. Am I reading the wrong place?
160,000 is both the
116,000.
that's the retained payroll.
Okay.
So the 160,000 figure is both retained and new positions as a result of their expansion.
Okay.
So they're going to be almost doubling their staff in the next 3 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. We will have the second reading at the August 26th council meeting.
Thank you.
Moving on to the resolution portion of our council meeting, beginning with Resolution 43-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with the city of Hilliard to provide dispatching services for the city of Hilliard Division of Police.
Thank you. Mr. Somerville.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's good to see you again.
Good evening.
The resolution that you have in front of you, that and resolution, the accompanying resolution you'll see immediately after this is the culmination of about a year's discussion with the city of Hilliard and with Norwich Township about the city of Dublin providing dispatching services for Norwich Township Fire Department and the Hilliard Police Department. We've been discussing for right around a year how we can merge our operations to make a 911 center that's efficient, that shows cost savings for all the participants, and can be operated in somewhat of a consolidated manner to give the highest level of 911 and dispatching services to all of the jurisdictions. The agreement you have before you tonight for the first one with Norwich Township, it is a 3-year agreement that will commence on October 1st. We are proposing starting services for the Norwich Township Fire Department ahead and stagger in the addition of the Hilliard Police Department to allow us to come up to staffing and phase those services in. They will be operating by having their 911 calls sent to our 911 center, and they would utilize our computer-aided dispatch system, and we would dispatch them in conjunction with the service that we already provide for Washington Township Fire. Also in your packets was a copy of the billing invoice that we're proposing for Norwich Township for the 3 months of service that they will receive for the remainder of this year. And then we included an Exhibit A with the additional resolution and contract with the City of Hilliard that is a draft disbursements of the cost for the 2014 operation, which is all dependent on what the actual budget is to provide the service and an analysis of the calls for service for each of the entities participating in the dispatch center. So it was always our intent to be able to recover our costs, and from a Dublin perspective, to be able to share in the savings that this sharing of services provides. So we developed the budget for the operation, and then using a call for service formula, spread the cost to operate the 911 center across all of the participants, thus everyone sharing equitably in the cost to operate the center. So this first resolution we're offering is the contract with Norwich Township. I would like to introduce Chief Bob Kaufman from the Norwich Township Fire Department. He's come in case you have any questions, and we recommend approval of the first resolution.
Excuse me, just a point of clarification. The order in which we have these, if I'm not mistaken, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, is we have Hilliard first and Norwich second.
I apologize for that.
That's okay. I mean, is there a reason to do it in a different order?
No, I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Mr. Keenan.
They still operating under KQJ 862?
Negative, sir. That call sign's been declined.
It's gone?
It's gone.
Oh, I grew up listening to it back in the day. Let me ask you a question. The Washington Township, the contract we've had with them for years, that will be revisited and revised into this formula?
We will come to you at a subsequent meeting to this. We've been in discussions with Washington Township. We do offer Washington Township some additional services that are not included in the contracts with Hilliard and Norwich. We offer them access to our radio system, and that comes with an additional fee. We also provide them some radio programming, maintenance, and inventory services that are included in their contract. So what we will be charging them will be somewhat of a different formula. However, from a call for service standpoint, we do spread that across all the participants.
Okay, that's good. Then as I understand it as well, the various entities, whether it be Norwich or I guess Hilliard, they would continue to do their own service vehicle kind of dispatching or whatever.
Yes, that is correct. This is for public safety dispatching.
Public safety only, so that's fire, EMS, police.
That's correct.
Okay, and then with respect to equipment, as you know, this equipment changes quite rapidly. It could be Motorola needs to get the next generation out so they can make a buck, or whomever. But at the end of the day, are we spreading? We have a mechanism in place to deal with equipment upgrades. I think I read that so we're good there.
Yes, we do include that in the contract, that any large-scale technological upgrades will meet with the entities that we're partnered with in an attempt to share costs across everyone.
And do we have to unilaterally do that, or is that a vote of the group? Or, I mean, just curious about the mechanism.
The contract allows us to call them back to the table to have the discussion.
Okay, all right, that's all I have.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. Jay, I'm concerned about if there were to be a catastrophic event, something really huge, and we've got all these entities under our wing, if you will, now, are we going to be able to handle everything that that would entail, just the one entity? Or wouldn't, it seems to me that it would be better to have more than one place?
Well, excellent question. One of the standards that we set as staff when we entered into these discussions after, as you'll recall, we were originally in some discussions with Worthington, and we ultimately ended up in discussions with Hilliard and Norwich Township. The level of service provided to our community was never going to fall. We went in there with the goal of making sure that the level of service to our community doesn't change. So we analyze call for service statistics to make sure we adequately staff the center to be able to handle any contingency that would occur in one community, the other, or in both communities simultaneously. We think we have a staffing proposal, and you will see that in one of your subsequent meetings. We'll be coming back with the staffing portion of this that allows us to not only gain an efficiency in providing 911 service, but actually helps our responders to be even more efficient, to keep from duplicating responses to a single incident, so to speak. One of the common things we see is with two different centers, if you get a report of an auto accident on a borderline roadway, a lot of times both fire departments, both police departments respond to it with full complements of public safety equipment. By having the calls come into a single answering point and a single dispatch point, that dispatcher can kind of play air traffic controller, so to speak, and send the equipment and save the resources from another community to be available. We also have a backup system in our 911 center should there be any catastrophic event that forces our dispatchers to evacuate the Justice Center. We have a standby backup area at fire station number 92 on Hard Road that the dispatchers can respond to and dispatch from there. We drill on that once every other year, where we literally close our 911 center in a mock emergency response, relocate to Station 92 and operate out of there for several hours. We also have a long-term agreement with the city of Westerville, should there be a large-scale community event here in Dublin that makes that not available for us to go to Hard Road, that we can relocate and use the resources at the city of Westerville.
Okay. My other question, I noticed that you mentioned in your memo that there's a House bill at the state that says that each count, or that in Franklin County, there can be no more than 4 funded public safety answering points, and that this agreement will help us be one of the 4.
That is correct.
So is the onus on us now to go out and make agreements with a few other communities to cement that position? And first, that's my first question, and I guess a rhetorical question for my colleagues. Why in the world would the state legislature be trying to tell us how best to serve our local community? Anyway, Mr. Somerville, please respond to my first question.
I sit on the State Emergency Services Board that is taking up that very question, so I'll leave the second question for discussion. The first question is, I want to make clear that of the discussions that we've had to share services from a dispatching standpoint, we have never gone out and looked for more business. We had communities come to us and ask, would it be possible for you to provide us this service?
Right.
And we took a stand based on what we know is coming from the legislature with the somewhat expensive upgrades that are going to come with next generation 911 to be able to provide text, video, and images to 911 and handle those calls, plus the proliferation of wireless devices, that we know that sharing of services and PSAP consolidation is coming, and that we think we can provide a service that would position Dublin very well to be that service provider to other communities. We have participated, as you're aware, we've had a couple memos in your packet relating to an LGIF grant that we secured with the cooperation of Arlington, Worthington, Hilliard, Washington, and Norwich Townships to analyze whether a bigger consolidation would be a wise move for those communities on the northwest side. I would certainly think that partnering with communities that have the same philosophy of a high level of service is something we would want to do, and is something that we've actively entered into discussions with using the help of the consultant and the LGIF grant. I will tell you that we are expecting the recommendations from the consultant by the end of this month or early September.
And in that case, would we continue to have a single site in Dublin? The Justice Center, I should say, and is there room there to do this expansion, if looking forward?
We have been analyzing space considerations. That's certainly been one of the things that has held us back from talking to more communities than just Hilliard and Norwich. I would not be surprised if I were you to see something in the capital improvements budget to renovate and expand the Justice Center for several reasons, not just to expand the communications center, but an expanded center is part of that request.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate you.
Other questions or comments?
I just have one real quick one. The run cards, is each community responsible for how those are set up?
For run response cards on fire and EMS, we've been meeting jointly with Washington Township and with Norwich Township, and we've seen a wonderful sense of cooperation between the two entities. They would be responsible for their run assignments. Our standard is if the computer-aided dispatch system can handle what they're asking us to do, or we can handle it with training and follow up with the dispatchers, that we will honor any run requests that they have. To be honest, in the discussions leading up to this contract, it's almost been a seamless process with Washington and Norwich.
Good.
Working together. It almost will feel as though the dispatchers are dispatching for a 7-station fire department as opposed to dispatching for 2 separate fire departments.
Very good, thanks. Your voice is as good as ever.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
I'd like to ask or invite Hilliard Police Chief Doug Francis to come forward. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We really appreciate this opportunity to be here this evening. Like Jay said, this is a project we have been working on for a considerable period of time. It's in light of I guess the new attitude of sharing services, sharing those costs across entities. This is the right thing to do at the right time. Jay was right. I came to Dublin with this offer because Dublin is the model of communication centers, not only in central Ohio, but I'm easy can say across the country. The services that the city of Dublin provide by far are just exceptional. And when I look as the chief running a communication center down in Hilliard, the kind of costs that I would have to assume to be a model of Dublin are astronomical, and it's costs that we would care not to assume, especially in this, like I said, in this environment of shared services. So I appreciate your consideration for this. As we move forward on this, just to inform your city council, our council takes this matter up when we return from vacation on August 26th. So we'll be going through this similar process with our city council. And I've just met with our council president, and I encouraged him to reach out to this body if we have any concerns or questions or comments. But I appreciate your consideration on this matter.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for your nice compliments and your confidence in our staff.
Thank you.
The police, the
Thank you.
dispatching services. Thank you.
And would you call for the vote, please? And this is with respect to Resolution 43-13.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Waring? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution 44-13.
Authorizing city manager to enter into an agreement with Norwich Township to provide dispatching services for the Norwich Township Fire Department.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. I don't think we need to have the same discussion.
Call for the vote.
Norwich Fire Chief Bob Kaufman, would you come forward, please? Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I appreciate you giving us time to come and talk to you. I'm sitting back here, and I noticed where you have where yesterday meets tomorrow, and I think that's a great quote to say right here because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take yesterday's technology and bring it up to date. And I appreciate everything Jay's done and helping us get this accomplished, and Chief Francis and this council, along with my Board of Trustees and the Hilliard City Council. So I thank you very much.
Great, thank you, sir. You're very good. And if you call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
And Mrs. Waring.
Great, thank you.
Mayor,
Thank you all.
before we move forward,
Yes.
just wanted to say, I'm glad Chief Francis mentioned about how our communication center is the model. I think it's better to hear from somebody outside of the city than inside of the city. But when you start having discussions with other entities, and we've had some preliminary discussions with the consultant that's doing the review, you truly do get a new appreciation for the job that Jay does in leading our communication center. And we're very fortunate for the service that we have. They do an excellent job, and it's a tough job. And if you ever get the chance to go sit in the communications room and watch them do their job, you'll be truly amazed and impressed and feel very comfortable with the service that we get.
Does this mean we're going to have in our budget an upgrade for new equipment, Jay? No,
We'll see.
All right.
No, thank you.
Very good. Well said, Marcia. Thank you. Moving on to Resolution 45-13.
Resolution intent to appropriate a 0.299 acre more or less fee simple interest encumbered by present road occupied, a 0.296 acre more or less fee simple interest encumbered by present road occupied, 0.069 acre more or less permanent storm sewer easement, and a 0.073 acre more or less temporary construction easement from Brandway Limited.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Ott, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. The city has been in active negotiations with Brandway Limited for the acquisition of necessary present road occupied and easements for the construction of the Kaufman Brand roundabout. We've been having good conversations with this particular property owner and have reached a stumbling block with their lender regarding necessary approvals they need to make. Therefore, we are pursuing the process of filing and are requesting your approval to allow us to begin that process if it becomes necessary to secure the property interest for the project.
Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, Ann, if you call for the vote.
Mr. Nissy Zerker.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider.
Yes.
Mrs. Waring. Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Well, that concludes the resolution portion of the agenda. Moving on to other, which is an I-270 US 33 interchange update. Sarah, it looks like you're up.
All right. I just want to take a moment to update you where we are with I-270 and US 33. It's been a significant collaboration throughout the region to bring this project forward. And during council's recess, a major announcement occurred with TRAC's preliminary funding list, the Transportation Review Advisory Council, listing the I-270 US 33 interchange as the fourth-ranked project in the state for funding. At just over $51 million. That combined with the support of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, around $25 million, and the City of Dublin's contribution, we're well on our way of being ready to have shovels in the ground towards the end of 2014. So really exciting and a wonderful opportunity for our community and what it means for us going forward. And because we are on that time, I should put one caveat in there. The TRAC funding is contingent upon some environmental clearance, which is diligently being focused on to make sure we meet that's not going to be an issue. Additionally, Community Relations has been actively seeking comments that can be submitted to TRAC in support of the project as the final funding decision comes forward. Those comments can be received through this Friday, the 16th, and then I believe the TRAC vote is later this month on the 22nd. As we've been excited about planning where we go next, the project has advanced. There we go. The project has been, as you're aware, broken into 2 phases. Phase 1 being what is currently aligned for funding, which involves some adjustments to nearly most movements, I should say, on the interchange. And then Phase 2 that adds approximately another $25 million improvement for the addition of the flyover bridge for our traffic going northbound to westbound movement. And when we've been discussing this scale of this project internally at the staff level with the officials at the Ohio Department of Transportation and their design consultant, CH2M Hill, we began having a conversation about aesthetics and what role does aesthetics have in this interchange, and should there be adjustments to the aesthetics that bring this more attuned to our community's expectations and our community's values. There is the ODOT has a standard design. They're open to the conversation of deviating from that standard design. They understand that it's a global conversation in our community about what that looks like and what it could mean, and we're just starting that venture here. And we're moving pretty quickly because we realize the best opportunities for potential aesthetic enhancements are in line with the design work that's underway right now. So when we started talking about design, we started talking about things like
Excuse
what
me,
is...
Sarah, could you put the Phase 1
Sure.
image back up here? Since that's about 15,
Yep.
20 years off.
No problem.
We hope. Thank you.
Started talking about aesthetics. We started talking about things like what would be a signature look, what would provide a sense of place in our community, what are unique identifiers that this interchange could have that are unlike any others in the metro area, perhaps in the state, that help let people know you are here, you've reached this destination. And as we've gone through that, the city staff here recently have issued a request for proposals last week in search of a landscape architecture firms that can help us meet that goal in the areas of hardscape and landscape. That request for proposals is currently out, and I've received some eager phone calls of firms who are interested and are preparing their responses to us, and we hope to move quickly on that selection process here throughout this month. Along with that conversation about landscape and hardscape has been a conversation about artwork, and how does artwork and landscape and hardscape interplay with one another. And so as we've continued this conversation of both art and landscape, we started having some conversations about the practicalities of landscape when you have an area as large as this project, and what kind of approach might we take to landscape to have something that is beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and also reasonable for long-term maintenance. And consensus at the staff level, for conversation's sake, that needs further refinement and community dialogue, has been an approach of a pastoral landscape, recognizing there's some hallmark imagery to Dublin, and if there's ways to take some of those elements and repeat them here. It also helps us address some issues related to ensuring we can manage non-invasive, the use of non-invasive species in the landscape, as well as the opportunity to find things that are colorful, that can play with the seasons and move forward. So we're just beginning to explore that. I wanted to bring that to you for your thought over the next few weeks and consideration and feedback any that you have when you're ready. And as we got into a conversation about artwork, we had a conversation with ODOT about what type of artwork is within their comfort zone. It's definitely different for the Department of Transportation to have a community come to them and say that we want to make some aesthetic changes, particularly at the level perhaps our community values would reflect. And we explored a lot of different ideas, whether it's sculptural elements placed within the interchange, whether it's additions onto bridges, is it the use of lighting, is it, what are sort of the parameters? And an area that the Department of Transportation expressed a lot of support for is the use of bas reliefs. And these reliefs are formulated from custom concrete form liners that are cast in place during the construction process. So I have just a few images here for you to see. We're exploring a particular artist who has a proven track record of working with over 15 different Department of Transportation agencies around the country
who does a extensive public engagement process in informing what is appropriate thematic and concept components to the addition of this type of artwork, and where is it appropriate, given the size of this interchange, that these kinds of elements may be appropriate to be incorporated. Recognizing that the scale of this is rather extensive, perhaps the biggest that we've taken on, being the largest single public improvement ever to occur in our community, the staff at the city initiated conversations with the Dublin Arts Council to understand their views and where their thoughts are related to this addition of artwork into this interchange. Fortunate enough that Michelle Crandall and I were invited to present to their board about a week and a half ago the concept and where there's this opportunity to make a signature mark, and put a request to the DAC board for two key things. First was a reevaluation of the funding directed towards the to the Emerald Parkway Bridge over US 33. Knowing that there's going to be some kind of thematic development at this interchange, would it be better to start here than on the bridge of Emerald Parkway with whatever that theme may be? And in the future years, that theme can be determined if it gets used again or if it's done here, if that bridge is still an applicable and desirable site for artwork. Then secondly, with the request of redirecting funding, we requested their engagement to be active participants in the research that needs to go into evaluating potential concepts and how that process would unfold for the community, for the engagement of the community, and for their expertise and eye that they can bring to that selection process. You have a memo from David Huon on behalf of the Arts Council Board in support of that redirection. And at this point, city staff is looking for some guidance from City Council, if indeed possible this evening, to see if you're comfortable as well with this initial approach and the direction that we're taking. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments, John?
Well, I'd just like to make a couple comments. Seeing that I was appointed by you folks to serve on the board, which has been a very pleasant experience, the Dublin Arts Council. Their feeling on this is they do want to be involved, and I think, well, they should be, since they are our art arm and represent us in the aesthetic endeavors. The other thing is, it was very interesting. I was impressed by the amount of passion they have for the assignment they were given, that they are the keepers of the art. They are supposed to come up with a great art collection that everybody's going to appreciate, and they've done a pretty good job, you got to say, in the past. So when they got to this particular project, and our staff was requesting the $150,000 that we had allocated to them to be returned for this particular project, it wasn't exactly keeping in our contract or our charter with them. And I got to say that they stepped up to a higher level and said, you know, this is really for the good of the community, and we want to participate in this. So they wish that the bridge, which would be an entirely different art project from this, that they be absolved of that, since they're losing the $150,000 funding, which makes sense to me, and be absolved of, you know, being involved in that project, and see those monies go to this project, which, you know, I think they all realize that tens of thousands of people are going to come by this and see it. So that was some of the requirements that they'd asked in returning the money, and that they be active in the art selection thing, which I think is really a good thing because of their interest. And I will say this, after 6 months of spending time with them, that in the review by Dale Saylor's office on their funding and their finances, I think they really do a good job. And I think most of you already been on this committee and spent time on it, but I think we're getting a lot of bang for our buck between the Sunday at the Parks and the other tasks that we've given them, and the biannual or the art production and all the other things were thrown at them. And I actually spent time with them, and I went to their concerts and passed the basket on a couple Sundays. And it's really a well-organized machine, and they're all very enthusiastic and very interested. They really love the city. So, you know, you really didn't have to be there to help them because they had plenty of people, and they were really organized. And I've noticed also they take direction well, because the suggestion was made that they start having refreshments at their Sunday at the Parks thing and take a percentage of the profits, and they immediately executed that without any questions. So really, I'm pretty impressed with them. It's a good team, and I think they stepped out of their comfort zone to try to help us out and see that this thing's executed. So I'm proud to be part of that committee, and I think we really have a good crew there with a very positive attitude. One question for you in the discussion of this is, the kind of money we have allocated between our part and their part isn't a huge amount of money for freeway interchange. And, what kind of impact can we really make? And I think they're right, too. I mean, there was some conversation after you left about changing the color of the cement works, and that's been done in different places in Tucson, and for really a big high impact thing. And I think you gave us a Dallas, Texas picture, and they're curious as to when you re-engage ODOT on this, will they dye the cement or will they paint the cement? And so that when you come around the outer belt, you're going to see a little bit different type of aesthetic that's going to say, hey, I've arrived in Dublin. This is a unique place. And then your idea of the rolling hills of Ireland is a great idea, and I would suggest that when you do that, that can be done inexpensively and maintained inexpensively if you come up with some very clever seas of contours and hills out there. So when you're coming around, you see that kind of thing, much akin to your slides, but very well artistically executed. So they're curious because, as you said, with the molds, and as expensive as they are, and thanks for the information and all the hard research that you and Michelle had done on this, there's not a lot of money to execute this commission. So, they can see that, that so many vertical elements could be created in concrete, but they think also to try to get that kind of imagery, we need you to go back to ODOT and find out about the painting of the actual ribbons of roads, or whether they can be, the cement can be dyed. And maybe with the three of these things, the elements of the landscape architecture, we can have a really unique, fantastic piece of roadway that everybody's going to come around that outer belt and say, this is really a cool thing to move through without causing enough distraction where, there'd be an accident. So
I think we sound like we're already designing it, and we haven't even gotten to that point, because the examples that I saw, I really love the one in Dayton, of course I would, but I'm not sure, about dyeing the cement or other, because a lot of them are in there, but I don't think it's our decision. I assume you're going to go out and do the regular thing of looking for an artist and taking direction in that way.
So I want to clarify the artist selection process. There's very few people who are in this niche of public art who can do it successfully and do it on our time frame. So we have been in conversation over the last month with an artist who we believe is meeting our requirements when you look at their project management skill set, and that they have the staff in their studio to be able to execute what we're asking be executed. That is no small task, the planning side of this kind of work. It's also no small task for the community engagement side of it. And to find an artist who has the skill set to do both of those is a very fortunate place to be in. So in our conversation with the Arts Council, it would not be a traditional call for artists national search. Unfortunately, the time frame we're on does not permit us to have that luxury. But I do think that it will not diminish the product that we receive. And the things about color, texture, placement, location are all things that are open for discussion with the Department of Transportation. They've been great partners in this conversation when we've asked them some pretty crazy things that, if they where their limits were, to understand those. And I think that we can find an artist who can work within the confines of the DOT. And still express that creativity.
How much money are we expecting that we'll be putting forth on this?
So there's a couple different elements of where we're at I don't believe that the 150,000 will be sufficient solely for the artwork.
I didn't think so either.
Well, we're still in negotiations on it, so we don't have, I will tell you, it is going to likely be,
But I mean, yeah,
No,
is it
we're
like
not
a
at-
$500,000 or what is it? I mean, give us a range. All right, that's what we're.
so those are our targets at, right now, as we're trying to get through design.
Yeah. And this is where, your slides up here are very important because they do show that image of Ireland that we all have seen who have visited the Emerald Isle. But, the rolling hills, and that can be done inexpensively with contours. Because I got a feeling that after you've given us the information on the molds and what they cost, it's going to be stretched out there. And that's why the Art Council is very interested in the dyeing of the cement to bring that kind of extra texture and color to it. Because if ODOT will pick up that expense, you're going to have a unique possible
They're not going to
interchange.
pick up any expense
So,
above whatever their normal.
Sarah, excuse me, can you tell me who paid for the special elements, the artistic elements at the Interstate 75 and 70 interchange in Dayton?
Sure, so that was paid for by the Ohio Department of Transportation. My understanding is they were some pass-through dollars from the federal government for a pilot program for aesthetic enhancements. That project was done about 13 years ago, I believe now. I think it was around 2000.
Not
Well,
that long.
I'm sorry, that it
That's okay.
started.
Yeah.
The engagement process, because their selection of theme happened in their public input sessions for the interchange project at 70 and 75.
So your point is it happened a long time ago?
That pot of money doesn't exist today. I mean, we've researched that. We're on our own dime here.
Okay, just thought I'd ask. All right, very good. If there's no other discussion, then I would make a motion that the $150,000 originally designated for the Emerald Parkway Bridge public art installation be deferred and utilized for the artwork for the I-270 US 33 interchange improvement project. Is there a second? There's no discussion. Ann, would you call for the vote?
Mr. Reiner? Yes. Vice Mayor Salee? Mrs. Boring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Staff comments?
Okay, few items here. First of all, the Irish Festival, we just got information earlier this evening from Allison that we're estimating the attendance at 104,000 plus, which is our highest number ever. So I think based upon the weather, we were pretty fortunate this year. And the one thing that I think this year, from even a few months back till through the festival, this was probably one of the smoothest operations that we had. It just seemed like everything clicked and went very well across the city. So I'd like to thank Allison and her group for leading that effort, because I think they had a very well thought out plan that worked very well. So it was a good event. The next item, a question was raised earlier this evening about some road closures, and I received this update from engineering. Highland Croy and Brand is scheduled to reopen on September 11th, and we've had conversations with the school districts so that they're kept in the loop with regard to impacts on their transportation issues. Brand and Kaufman is scheduled to close next Monday, August 19th, and reopen late in the fall for the roundabout project. And Dublin Road South, it should be reopened by the end of the month for the bike path project.
Marcia, do you know what the delay, or it seems like that's taking a long time, like they've had the bike path laid out, it looks like it's paved and ready to go.
I know they had some delays when we were having all the rain out there.
Right.
I don't know if that was,
Yep, it was the delivery of the bridge
okay.
and the fabrication of the bridge, then having it delivered and set. So that just got done. The path got paved Saturday, so they're now in the process of doing the finishing elements. Yes.
Other question while you're here, the rest of Dublin Road South, will any traffic be maintained while that is going on? Like, we maintain one lane, or are we just gonna?
No, it really needs to be a closure because you try and maintain one lane. We've had a very difficult time getting folks to comply with the road closure. There's been a lot of bypass through the work zone, which really makes it a dangerous situation for the workers themselves. They're not expecting that folks are going to come through the work zone.
Actually, there's a lot of cars that continue to travel along Dublin Road. They just kind of weave in and out of the,
Yeah,
Right.
I've seen it myself.
And you have to leave the barricades open in order to get delivery of materials. So there really isn't a good way of managing it short
Well,
of
there's
police
residents that
enforcement.
have to go.
Fire and everything.
So,
Okay, just inquiring, 'cause I got a question.
Paul, is there any other information on concluding the Glick Road bicycle trail?
I don't think we have any updates presently. We're still working on acquisition on Section 3 with one property owner.
Another item, there was a memo in your packet with regard to the Kaufman Road fence and some of the work that we've been doing at staff level. And so we have a proposal, what we recommend pursuing with regard to the fence. The two ends, the subdivisions on the, or the homeowners associations on the ends, they would like to maintain the fence, and they have funding to maintain and repair it. The association that's in the middle is not a forced and funded association, and they do not have sufficient funds to repair and update the fence. And one of the things that we've learned, we requested a survey to be completed, because once we started looking at GIS, it appeared that the fence goes in and out of right-of-way, and based upon the survey work, it does. So there is portions of the fence that are in our right-of-way and portions that are on the private property. So one of the things that we're looking at, when the fence was originally installed, part of the reason why was the location to the high school. And now we have issues of the events that we have at 4th of July, and then also the Irish Festival. So the residents feel that the fence is something that helps prohibit or stops people from going through their yards. And so that's why we're looking at the option of vegetation. If you look along Kaufman Road now, there's some areas that it's pretty thick right now. The vegetation has grown over the years. And so we think if we can work with the residents to include or add to some of the vegetation, then for the middle section, we would remove that fence to eliminate the issue of the ongoing maintenance. So that's what we're proposing to pursue, and our next step is to get back with the homeowners association and the residents to have those discussions.
I wanted to play devil's advocate with you on that. You mentioned that you were gonna maintain it for 1 year and then turn it over to those homeowners, and I just anticipate nothing but problems with that. I mean, you know, how many affected houses are there? 10, 15, or
I don't know how many
8,
there
10?
are, but
Just ballpark. About 15. So you're going to be dealing with 15 people herding cats trying to get them to maintain that. I want you to think about that, number one. Number two, the fence on either side, I mean, you may have people say, we'd rather have that plant material instead of the fence and the buffer.
and they may.
And you know, I want what they have. So, you know, sometimes you have to treat all your children equally, and I just want you to think about those two things.
And as far as the plant material and the maintenance, we would get plant material that it's not something that's highly manicured, similar to the trees, but it would be something that would be easier to maintain or look better if it weren't maintained than that fence. So that's what we're trying to resolve.
I agree with Mike, though. I think it would look better to have it just all vegetation. I mean, just because they say that they're willing, you know, to take care of it.
Well, you
it
can
looks
deal
sort
with
of
the easement
strange.
issue as well. And you could deal with that a lot easier than you can with the fence that's on there, because you probably don't want to go repair that fence or.
Oh, we wouldn't be repairing it. They would be repairing the fence.
But then why haven't they repaired it so far? I mean, that's, you know, that was just my concern is what makes us think in the future they would behave differently than they have in the past regarding the fence?
Well, and some of the things that we can look at, and, you know, comments that we heard from them is that they know that this has been a long-standing issue, discussion at the city. They're kind of waiting to see what we do on this issue. And then also, there's something that we have as an option to do that we've never pursued, is the issue of code enforcement if it's not properly maintained. So as part of our follow-up with them, we'll let them know what we're proposing for the middle section and get feedback on that as well.
I guess I'm hopeful going forward that, some certainty with respect to responsibility or obligation merely. I think that, it's been an unanswered question. I mean, years ago, we thought it was all the residents or the homeowners association responsibility, and now it looks like there's a dual responsibility. But I appreciate the concerns expressed, by both of you. One of the questions that I have, Marcia, is with respect to the money, that the city would spend to install the plant material for Shannon Park. Why wouldn't we offer, make the same financial contribution to Shannon Village and Hemingway Village for any, improvements or repairs that they need to do? At least initially. It'd be their responsibility, going forward.
Yeah,
But it seems as though Shannon Park is benefiting, by virtue of the fact, I understand there's the practical obstacle, as a result of the fact that they don't have a forced and funded homeowners association, but it seems as though, an argument could be made that Hemingway and Shannon Village are being penalized, if you will, or not getting the same benefit. So that's one thing that jumped out at me.
And we had that discussion at staff level that probably, or that likely is something that they'll raise, especially once they are aware that the middle section is being funded by the city, that it is something we anticipate will come up as an issue. But so that's our next step, to go back with them. Our goal is to try to get this resolved. It's been something that we've all been talking about 15 or 20 years and trying to bring some resolution to it.
And I don't have any idea of the extent of the repair necessary, for, fence that would, continue to exist. But, hopefully it would be less than $15,000 to $20,000 that we would otherwise be expending to install the plant material for Shannon Park. Just a thought.
The thing that I think we have to be a little careful on, though, is that I think historically, when it's been forced and funded, we've made them pay for these things. So if we're going to change a policy, remember, you're setting precedent for future
Yeah,
things.
the one thing that does make this area a little different is our events and the amount of traffic that goes, especially out here on the corner. There's a lot of people that go through that area during the 4th of July and the Irish Festival, and the fence does provide a barrier that people do, or at least most people do respect. So there is something that I think from the standpoint of our events that we have, we do need to make sure they have some barrier that prevents people from
Right.
walking through there.
Yeah.
Is there another material, like, can you have a hardy plank type material instead of wood that would last? I don't know if they make that sort of thing for fences or not.
I would think that they would. That's something we can look into.
No, I didn't say that. I said hardy
Hardy
plank,
plank.
which looks like wood, but it behaves
Yeah.
much more durably, and that just seems like that might be a good alternative for those folks.
Well, we'll wait to hear more.
Okay, all
Thank
right.
you for
And the other item to bring up, this was in your packet that was distributed back in July, the issue of the sandwich board signs and the proposal or the alternative that we recommended at staff to look at the individuals or the businesses that are currently located there, that the one-time fee would be waived for them, but that a fee would be set in place for the sandwich board signs to be effective the first of the year, once we've had the review as part of the cost study this year, and to move forward with that fee and part of the regulation and the requirements of those signs.
I'd like to add a component to that possibly, and that's that the sandwich boards have some kind of aesthetic appeal to them, and I think they'd be interested in that. I was talking to the Hay Penny folks, and they said, yeah, we like to carve ours out to look like the shape of Ireland. And as you know, you've seen restaurants where they have a chef, and it's sort of artsy as you go down the street. It adds a certain ambiance. You see a lot of that in Portland and other cities. So instead of just being a big square white thing with magic marker written on it, it'd be nice if they'd add a little bit of spin to it. Each company sort of representing what's inside that building.
We can look at that, and it's part of the code that we're going to be looking at in Bridge Street to see where that fits in there.
Yeah, thank you.
I like your suggestion about, do you need action on this?
Well, if council's okay with what we're
Okay,
saying.
never mind, I agree.
Okay.
I just don't want to
So-
see a real big fee for these people.
No,
What
No,
you're
we're
trying to
looking-
do is track these signs, where they are, who has them, and know
Regulate,
the
safe-
locations.
Yeah. So
Okay.
has it been lifted that they didn't have to have this done this fall?
Yes,
And they're aware of that?
yes.
Okay.
They are right.
They've all
They-
gotten the second letter saying that it wasn't August 1st?
As far as the time frame, the change from August 1st to October 1.
We sent it to October 1st, but I'm not really that concerned about the time frame. We can give them as much time as they need. We've
When are we
already
doing
been
the cost of
contacted
services
CPA about
look?
extending the
It'll be,
time frame out.
well, this fall, we'll be providing the update based on CPI and for
Right.
any other new
Right,
services.
the odds and
to be
ends.
included. It'll be sometime in the next few months. I don't have the time frame.
Maybe we should wait till we finish that to enforce whatever.
Yeah, I don't think we need to, but I'd like them to see, get a letter
Yeah.
and indicate that we're disbanding the fee at this time until the cost study is completed, and then, it would be effective in 2014 or something
Yeah,
like
we're looking to
that.
the first of the year for implementation,
Right.
or whatever you want to say.
I guess I'm a little concerned about assessing a fee to the existing businesses. I understand going forward, but, that letter that we got from the Cupcakery, and that was moving to me, she shared with us the percentage, and how much sales she would have to get. That's a lot of cupcakes for a sandwich board that we encourage. We want our businesses to have them, as John said, if they're, done well. And I guess I would be interested in maybe seeing some sort of a balance. If you want a plain Jane white sandwich board that you're going to write on
We
with.
can vet that when we go through cost of services, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to allow staff to maybe explore that, and if something's aesthetically pleasing. I understand the need to regulate the signs, but I also appreciate these are very small businesses that are operating on very slim margins, and we want to very much encourage them and encourage the creativity involved with a cool sign versus, as you said, the white with the erasable marker.
Well, except that's the challenge I think we have, that there are some that are formally made, because their business allows them to be formally made and not changed every week. But then you have things like the Cupcake Place or Jenny's, then their purpose in advertising is the new product they have that day or that week. So that's why they have the more blackboard concept, whiteboard concept. So, I think there are two different types of sandwich boards. I'm not sure why we sent this letter to them to begin with. Was it because you didn't like the appearance of things, or because the location of them was concerning you?
It was a combination of things. I tried to put some of the history in there from the
Right,
background.
I mean,
how we
I
got
saw
to
all
where
that,
we-
but, it seems so inconsistent with, here we finally have vitality in the area, and then we send this letter to people saying, well, yes, but you can't advertise.
Yeah, well, I don't think we wanted to say you can't advertise. I think it was a matter of making sure that people understand they needed to keep sidewalks clear, that they had a limit as to the number of signs they could have. There were size limits. I mean, there are certain limitations that we wanted to them. I don't think we want to put any regulation in that would discourage them from having them. Certainly, I enjoy them. I think they make for an interesting part of the district. It's
Right.
kind of a unique element to it.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't think we're trying to discourage them in any way.
Just an additional comment on what Marilee said. I think that, and back to you, Amy, too, I think, it's a cupcakery, the sign could be shaped like a cupcake, but there's enough white space, you can do your daily whatever, in the same way with an ice cream cone in front of Jen's. So you have enough white space on it. You still have an interesting sign, but you still have space to change the lettering. So that can all be accomplished, I think.
Sounds expensive to me.
Yeah, I'm not interested in starting to regulate what a sandwich board sign looks like. I think that's going into too much on this. And I also think that we should have a cost of service. One idea we had with the cost of services was that the taxpayers do not pay for the services that, the businesses pay for it. And it's only $80 for for the rest of the time, and I think it makes sense for, for registering or keeping track of those kind of things, kind of the cost of doing business.
Okay, we're going to hear more from staff, right? Marcia, I'm sorry, did you want to say anything more?
That's it, I'm done.
Okay, good. Roundtable, John.
I just want to say, again, thanks to the staff and the volunteers at the Irish Festival. I know you're probably going to say more on this, but, I never paid that much attention to the quality of the musicians. I'm not an Irish music aficionado, and it wasn't till I sat down and talked to Allison and then started talking to people to come to realize that they're flying over the best bands they can from Ireland. And then talking to folks there who said, we're groupies, we follow this band, we came from Kentucky, West Virginia just to hear them play. So I didn't realize that we were at the apex of the Irish art music scene. And this is the best you're going to see all in one area until I started talking to the people. And I was really impressed with that. I mean, that you and your staff and the folks were able to assemble these kind of people, all in Dublin. A guy from Pittsburgh said to me, God, how big is your city? And I said, about 40,000 people. And he said, I can't believe a city that small is putting on an event like this. I just can't believe it. Of course, then you read in the paper about the guy from Boston who said he was jealous. Would love to see Boston do something like this. There's a city of 1 million people, so it's pretty interesting. And then, again, the volunteer level of all the 1,100 people that showed up to make this thing happen, just amazing. Taking their kids with them, teaching them about community service. I mean, really, we got a lot to be proud of because of our citizenry and our staff and the kind of exceptional event that you folks really put on. It was awesome. So hats off to Mary Jo and Christine and you, Allison. It was really an amazing event. That's
Thanks,
it.
John. Mary Lee?
We had a finance committee meeting of the whole prior to council tonight, and I'm happy to report that we're very sound financially, and we're up about 7.37%. I think everybody has the finance report that Angel put together for us. So we're cautiously optimistic, that's the right word there, Angel, that we will certainly be similar, if not slightly better, than 2012 by the end of the year. I also wanted to congratulate Allison and all of the staff for Irish Festival as well. Even though we know the weather contributed to such great success, it did feel like there was a completely different kind of spirit among people. And I'm sure it was because we weren't dying from the heat, But that resulted in the performers really performing even better than normal, I think. It just all seemed to be come together very well. And I always try to walk around and spend less money but talk to vendors and not buy from each one I talk to. And all of them seem to be feeling good about the experience they were having this particular year as well. Just wanted to point out that the September 5th Homeowners Association meeting is the same day as the JIG, and I think there's a couple other things in town, but I don't know that those people go to the JIG, but it is a competition.
We do.
Yes.
Not that night.
And on the water and sanitary sewer memo you gave us, I was hoping that this information could get to us before Kathy is off of council, because this was certainly something that was number one on her list. And I see it says in October or November, so the early October would be helpful perhaps for that discussion.
Actually, I was thinking the same thing. Thank you.
Good, great. I'm going to let Mike talk about this township
Okay.
thing. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
So if Mike's bringing the township thing up, I will also let you go through it, because I thought we were going to have a presentation. question now that you bring up the conflict with the 5th, is it too late to change the Fall Civic Association meeting? Because I think we should be supporting events in our town.
We can look at that. I'm not sure what type of information has been sent out, and,
Okay.
you know, the HOAs have probably all been notified, so we can look at that and see if there's the potential to change, but I'm not sure at this point
Okay.
that we
If
can.
you- If you would, that'd be great.
I
And
agree.
I had to add to it, Allison, about the Irish Festival. It's, for some reason, you said you had that many people. I don't know if it's where we stayed. We did stay out of the kids' zone, which it looks like you need more space for that, because that's wildly popular. We didn't feel the crowds. Like Mary Lee said, the atmosphere was great. And for some reason, I guess it was the weather, as our families walking out, they're going like, wow, look how supportive people are of this talent, and packing all the venues that you had there. And you've heard that, I don't know, you know, you've heard it from all of us. I also think for some of us who had not volunteered before, I know Mary Lee does every year, that was fun, that you gave us that opportunity in memory of Jim Finn, that we enjoyed doing that and became a vital part, and more involved kind of part of it. But it was just a fantastic time. My family had a fantastic time, and you've got a lot to live up to next year, so good luck. And I'm surprised to see you're living and standing here today.
She's had a couple weeks.
Well, she's been tearing down, you know, and so it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
I did attend, actually, this is the second meeting in less than a week with respect to the Tartan West folks, and it's that area of Dublin that's in Jerome Township. It's kind of in an island. There are issues with the payment through the community authority with, for fire and EMS service over there. Sarah Ott and Jennifer Riedler have been very involved in this. We've had numerous conversations over the last 3 or 4 weeks. These people just want some help. They say, look, we are your residents as well. And even though it's in an island of Jerome, you know, we really need to try and get this resolved. I think we're headed in the right direction. The community authority meeting tonight, the community board passed several resolutions that I think will lend itself to a solution. The only outside issue is billing. And I know you folks are working on that, so we'll probably get another memo and hear more about this next week. And you have a memo in your packet. So if there's anybody has any questions, feel free to give me a call. The Union County Auditor has been at the last 2 meetings as well, to try and keep the peace amongst all the folks. So anyway, I also had a question with respect to the packet, Marcia, on the residential permit for the President's Cup. And I'm curious, are we allowed to do that? Do we have an ordinance that allows us to go require that from a residence to? Oh, there he is.
Either one.
Chief?
Who wants to take it?
He's got a gun, so we'll.
The event permit application basically has a definition of what an event is. And obviously, if someone's just having a birthday party and they live on the
Right.
course, they're not going to be required to get an event. But any event that actually could impact the public safety of the area or could have an impact on our zoning codes and that type of thing would require an event permit.
It's just not clear to me what that definition is, though, and, you know, where do you draw the line? I just want to make sure we're on good legal ground with this.
We're on good legal ground, and we're very careful where we draw the line, and it's just that the President's Cup is such an extraordinary event in terms of security on an international basis, and in terms of traffic, controlling traffic, getting rescue vehicles up along the course if they need to. We believe we're fine legally, Mike. It'll be interesting to see what reaction we get from the residents, and, you know.
And essentially, we're only interested in the same kind of venues that, for the memorial, have the gate cuts to the course and are part of the event.
And
And
is
for the
this only
memorial
for-
tournament, it would be covered by the overall event
Right.
permit for the tournament.
Is this only for people that are on the perimeter? Because we have some people
Yes.
even in this room that have had parties.
No, it's only for
with
people
a
on the
lot of
course.
number of folks attending.
It's only on the perimeter of the course.
Only the perimeter.
Yes.
And you can make that distinction too, I guess.
Well, we believe we can, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, there have actually been, I mean, on Leavenworth, links. There's been some significant issues with,
Oh, I understand that. I'm just curious from the residential perspective, that's a little different than, no. Final thing, I just wanted to point out that I agree with Wally on those flowers. You'll remember a year or two ago, we talked about Charlevoix. I think if anybody's been up there, it's an incredible stretch of flowers. I mean, it must go on for a mile or two. I just wanted to encourage if we can continue to expand that so it covers the whole concourse. I mean, they are spectacular when you come down there, and whoever's taking care of them is doing one heck of a job because they are really looking good.
You know, Mike, 12 years ago, we suggested having a day in the spring where the citizens go out and we plant the streets like that. Just have a party then in the street after it's all
That'd be
done.
fun.
You know? So we just prep the both sides of the road and just plant it out, and then we have a street party with the volunteers. It's beautiful. That's been suggested a lot. We just never launched that. That's a neat community thing.
Thanks, Mike. Rick?
Just quickly, Allison, nice job, thank you. And actually, Marcia answered my question with respect to Dublin Road, so that's all I had.
Thank you, Rick. Amy?
I apologize, I have a number of items. One, my area of Dublin has been getting sprayed frequently for mosquitoes, and we happened to meet the truck head-on and furiously rolled up the sunroof and closed the vents of the car and tried not to breathe as we passed the truck. But my husband said, is this effective? Because they keep hitting it. And I said, I don't know. I don't know how we test the effectiveness of our spraying. It's my understanding, because back when we first moved into Dublin, it was all over the place. Every week you'd get it. And in researching it a little bit, what I learned was that the spray pattern is, the spray only goes out maybe 50 feet. And so that it doesn't go far from the truck is my point. And so you kill the adults that happen to be flying in the area, but the mosquitoes, perhaps like in the woods in our park, wouldn't be disturbed by that. And so I was curious how we assess the efficacy of the spraying and make sure that we're spraying and that it's having an effect to knock down the population of the mosquitoes. So if you could, I'd be interested in the answer to that.
Okay.
Other question I got from somebody was about the security of the facility, the Dublin Spring facility. I guess there's been 2 folks that have walked away from that facility, and there's concern about, maybe they need to be doing something with their procedures that's a little bit different if, in fact, I have no idea what the situation was, but they were a little concerned that there was somebody reported missing, and we were
Yeah.
told not to approach him.
Yeah, based upon those, the chief and others at the city have met with Dublin Springs staff, and chief can give you an update.
Yeah, we just met with them last week, and we are trying to work out some policy issues that we see, and there may be some issues with their fence that we might ask them to make some recommendations on, possibly asking for some variances on the fence. So we're still talking to them about that, but there's a number of issues that we think are responsible for some of the walkways I've had.
Okay. Other question with regard to the Athenery Shopping Center and the definitions that we've been wrestling with for years about fast food and not fast food. I guess they had another application up there, and someone asked me, why are we still doing that? And so I'll just let legal or somebody get back to us. And then lastly, I wanted to emphasize how important I think the community plan is when we make our zoning decisions and we make our recommendations for zoning. I learned today in our meeting at our pre-planning and zoning commission meeting that we hold monthly, that I attend on council's behalf with the planning and zoning chair and planning staff, was today, and we happened to talk about a couple pending projects. And I'm listening to what's going on in the meeting, and then I'm seeing that some of these projects are very much against what the community plan recommends, and in my view, that makes planning's job pretty easy. If there's kind of a question, it seems to me that we would side with the community plan, and that would be the end of the discussion. But understand, people can apply for anything, but I guess I'm surprised when staff may be recommending for things against what the community plan has stated back in '07 and then affirmed again as recently as 2 months ago. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'd just like to add my compliments to, first of all, the event staff for a successful Dublin Irish Festival, but also the entire city staff, that assist in this effort. We know that, it can't happen without their assistance as well. And speaking of which, like the rest of council, I'm interested in the experience that our vendors have and other people that are participating in the festival. And the vendors consistently, but I'm reminded every year, but again this year, spoke so very highly of our staff. The staff that, empties the trash, that, they commented, I don't know, I guess maybe it was Friday morning because we'd had some rain, maybe over Thursday night. And, they just said the staff, their enthusiasm for their jobs and, as we all know, but maybe the public doesn't appreciate, they can be working 12 to 14-hour days, for at least a couple of days in a row, if not more. But they talked about the wood chips in particular, what a hit the wood chips were and how effective they were and so forth. I mean, that's just one example. I mean, they just say no other, festival does what Dublin does. So just wanted to pass that along. And then also the volunteers, of which there are over 1,000, if I'm not mistaken, again, who participate with so much enthusiasm and so forth. And and the volunteers also complement our staff and the support that our staff provides in the organization and so forth. Marcia, I would agree with you. My sense of the festival is that it just went so smoothly. I'm sure the weather helped, certainly everybody's mood and so forth, so that was great. And speaking of which, Alice and I have a letter of, what is this, letter of recognition from State Senator Jim Hughes. He says that in his letter, I've recently learned that the Dublin Irish Festival was voted the 2013 best annual event for out-of-towners by the readers of City Scene magazine. I'm sure you're aware of this. But there's a letter signed by him and the President of the Ohio Senate, so I'll pass that along to you. And thanks to Senator Hughes for that recognition. And then interestingly, I guess it's what we remember, what occurred most recently is what's foremost in our minds, but it occurs to me that July 4th occurred, since our last meeting, and what a great success that was. Again, we were fortunate with the weather, I think. I think that went very well. I know all of us heard a lot of compliments, regarding both the musical act and the fireworks, and people say, it's the best fireworks that, they've ever seen, better than some other fireworks in Central Ohio and beyond. And so anyway, job well done. We forget about that, but, both of these events are just fantastic, so.
Everybody loves Chicago. Everybody that talked to me said that they were thrilled we'd moved up a few decades, and and what was really great about them was that they were a family band. I mean, the way that it wasn't sort of some of the stuff we've had in the past that some people had concerns about. And I love the fact that they never left the stage. So for an hour and 45 minutes they played, they took turns the way they did that. That was really sharp.
Everybody said it was the best ever.
Yeah.
So, and kudos to City Council for authorizing, additional funds, to bring entertainment like that. So, it is, I agree with you. It is the easy part, but in any case. Okay, so thank you all very much. We're adjourned.
All right.